Cheers and salutations. Welcome to Americans Learn. My name is Kit, and please be sure to like, comment, share, and subscribe, and hit that ring bell notification. That way all of you are made aware when we upload new content onto our YouTube channel. And today we're going to mix it up just a little bit. I know I promised I would start in order with Sabaton history, but I saw in the video in which we watched the Night Witches, people said you should have watched the animated video, to which I apologize. So here's what I'm going to do in turn. If you guys want us to watch that animated video, the answer is yes, we will do it. Just give us your feedback in this comment section. But I think it's important for us to learn who they really are. So thankfully, to all of you, our outstanding viewing audience, you told us about Sabaton history. They have a history channel. And why not find out the real in-depth history? I mean, one, I love the music video, but let's learn the true history as much as we can about who the Night Witches were, the Soviet pilots who dropped curses and bombs upon the vile Third Reich. So let's go ahead and let's find out all we can about them. Now, as always, for all the videos that we watch, the original link is in the description box below. And since I'm a huge fan of history channels and documentary channels and so much more, please be sure to support Sabaton History. So the original video link is in the description box below, so please do that. Give them support, like, comment, share, subscribe, etc., etc., etc. But since I'm now in charge of the ones and twos, let's get ready to pull up this video and find out about the Night Witches, female Soviet pilots. Sabaton History, number 50.
When you think of the soldiers fighting the Second World War, you probably think of men with machine guns.
However, in our song Night Witches, we're singing about badass women in bomber planes.
The large-scale industrialization of the Soviet Union in the late 1920s and 1930s opened up the country's economy for women in the workplace, and there was indeed no job for which a woman could not apply. Soviet propaganda encouraged them to join the workforce and steer the great machines of modernization, and the most fantastic symbol of that.
I actually find it really fun to check out some of the old Soviet propaganda sometimes, or even either at some of the World War II propaganda. It's just like, you know, people will put a lot of time and effort in making those imagery. You know, yes, of course, it's propaganda, but they really pop out at you, especially during the Second World War. You see all these images like we must win. This is the only way to victory. It has that Warhammer 40K feel to it. I know. Just anyways, different subject for a different conversation.
Particular age of machines was the airplane. Many were inspired by Soviet heroine Marina Raskova, who set world records for long-distance flights, showing what pilots and planes from the Soviet Union could achieve. Newly emerging and quite popular flying clubs were also a chance for many women to escape the monotony, or the poverty, of their homes and learn how to become an aircraft mechanic or even a pilot themselves. Fast forward to the summer of 1941. Weeks after the German invasion, hundreds of thousands of Soviet women flocked to the colors, enlisting as nurses, signalers, or anti-aircraft gunners. The experienced female pilots of the flying club served as instructors and advisors for male recruits, but were not allowed themselves to fly into combat. The argument was that there were enough male pilots available. Marina Raskova, however, was determined to make a difference. With her influence in Moscow's political circles as a hero of the Soviet Union, she appealed to Stalin himself and got permission to create 3 all-female flying units: the 586 Fighter Regiment, the 587 Heavy Bomber Regiment, and the 588 Night Bomber Regiment. Raskova was a natural leader, and her call for volunteers was soon answered by hundreds of young women from all over the Soviet Union, hoping to break into the ranks of elite female pilots. By mid-October, as confusion and chaos swept Moscow in the face of the rapid German advance, Raskova had set up her training camp at the large aerodrome in the city of Engels on the Volga River. There, the women of the 3 regiments were to be trained with planes, engines, armaments, and aeronautical studies and military drills. While the college-educated women were trained as navigators, those with factory or armory experience would work as mechanics. Naturally, all volunteers wanted to become famous fighter pilots themselves, but only the most talented and experienced pilots were accepted into the fighter regiment. They needed lightning-quick reactions and the ability to remain calm in battle. The professional pilots with many hours of experience.
I had no idea these brave women existed. This is actually pretty incredible. I wish they taught this and shared these stories more. Shout out to Sabaton for this gem and their music video, Night Witches.
Were put into the heavy bomber regiment, led by Raskova herself. Those with less experience put into the night bomber regiment, but those women may have needed the greatest courage of them all. The night bombers were to fly the Polikarpov U-2, a flimsy biplane compared to then modern dive bombers. It had been designed and manufactured since the late 1920s and was used most often as a training plane. It had two cockpits, one for the student and one for the instructor. It was a small and slow aircraft made from lightweight plywood and percale, which was finely woven fabric made out of cotton. It was cheap to manufacture.
Well, Jesus Christ. You're I mean, that thing's gonna get blown up. That takes courage to fly that kind of thing, especially with the kind of aircraft that the Luftwaffe had.
Unimpressive and outdated, but nonetheless a reliable workhorse for transporting the wounded, dropping supplies, or reconnaissance flights. The Soviets nicknamed it the crop duster or the duck, while to the Germans it was to be known as the sewing machine or the plywood Russ, since it was totally defenseless and too slow to outrun any of the German fighter planes. It could only operate in the safety of night. In fact, though, even small arms fire could bring it down fairly easily. But the overall situation was so bleak that even those little planes became symbols of hope and resistance. Over time, the women began to appreciate the simplicity of the crop duster, especially since the women of the heavy bomber regiment had to fly the Su-2, which was nicknamed the bitch because of how difficult it was to master. But
Oh, we gotta fly this heavy bitch around.
despite Soviet theoretical ideology of equality between the sexes, Russian machismo was pretty merciless, wearing boots, tunics, and greatcoats way too large for them since they were designed for men. The women were constantly mocked and teased by their male counterparts for their lack of femininity. But this only hardened their determination, since to them, a soldier was a soldier. Raskova ordered the women to crop their hair, and the battalion's commissar forbade anything she saw as girl talk and prohibited any sort of flirtatious behavior. By late May 1942, they were finally equipped with enough U-2 aircraft to prepare for combat. By summer, they left the aerodrome for the Southwestern Front to meet the German advance on Stalingrad and the Caucasus. As Axis forces were advancing on Rostov, Raskova's night bombers hit the German ammunition and fuel dumps, the vehicles, and the ground troops. Now, it was the navigator's job to find the target and close in on enemy lines. Then the pilot would turn off the engine and silently glide through the night. The first planes would throw down flares to illuminate the targets, and the loads would be dropped. Then they would turn on their engines and escape before the Germans could fight back. The U-2s were converted to bombers by simple, at first improvised attachments. A bomb load of up to 300 kilos was slung under the wings. Okay, this was not enough to inflict a lot of damage, but that wasn't the main purpose of the night bombers. They were to constantly harass the enemy, to deprive them of sleep and wear them down, to grant them no rest periods. And for that, The Germans hated them. After learning that the night bombers were usually piloted by women, they would give them their famous nickname, the Nachthexen, the Night Witches. Every morning, the women came back with red faces and bloodshot eyes. They rebuilt their lives around their nocturnal life, having dinner in the morning and going straight to bed. They were constantly tired and hungry, but they were sure proud of showing the Soviet Union that women could fly as well as any man.
That takes courage, flying those flimsy planes, and I mean no disrespect to the planes, but you know, especially against the kind of weaponry that the Wehrmacht and the Luftwaffe had, and then changing your entire schedule. Because let's face it, human beings, we wake up in the good old morning and sleep at good old night. You know, doing that whole shift, you know, it does take a toll on the human body and mind just to do that. So, wow, these are some strong women. The Night Witches casting their curses upon the German Third Reich.
And with every successful mission, they earned more respect from the male pilots and officers. But that would not protect them from the constant danger they faced. They had no parachutes, since Soviet high command figured that in case of engine failure, the planes could simply glide back to Earth. This totally disregarded the fact that the percale cotton fabric and plywood frame burned like crazy. And if that ever happened, it was likely that both pilot and navigator burned to death.
Oh,
But
God.
the Soviet high command, that was still preferable to being captured alive by the Germans. In fact, those who were shot down or crashed behind enemy lines were expected to fight to the death, as capture was dishonorable to any Soviet soldier and would leave a stigma for the rest of their lives. Even pilots who were shot down behind the lines but hid and made it safely back to their own lines were interrogated and often condemned to death by the commissars. On January 4th, 1943, Roskova died in an accident on her way to the Stalingrad front. But the 588 was determined to live by her ideals. And as one pilot wrote, it was a time for bombing and bombing.
Canvas, wings of death, prepare to meet your fate. Night Bomber Regiment 388.
The Soviet counterattack prompted the hasty withdrawal of the Germans from the Caucasus and gave the Night Witches more than enough opportunities to harass and attack the retreating troops. From the steppes near Stalingrad to the high mountains of the Caucasus, the praise for the Night Witches grew. The freezing winter nights through which they flew at high altitudes with open cockpits did not discourage the women from fulfilling their mission.
By the way, during that time era, this is because I've seen some documentary films on the Battle of Stalingrad, and of course, there's also the good film starring Jude Law, Enemy at the Gates. I love that film. That was the coldest Soviet winter to ever hit the continent, or not a continent, but it hit the Soviet Union at the time. So that was a pretty big deal to be flying those kind of planes, especially exposed to the elements. It'll hurt the face.
Missions. In fact, only once were they forced to remain grounded for a time. On the night of July 31st, 1943, during the German counteroffensive on the Taman Peninsula in Novorossiysk, the Night Witches approached the German positions and noticed that the anti-aircraft batteries were strangely silent. Suddenly, flares lit up the sky. It was a German night fighter attack, and in moments, U-2 planes were falling out of the skies, burning to the ground. The survivors broke off, scattering back into the darkness. Such high casualties in one night were a shock to the regiment, but one that didn't last long. The war that eventually turned against the German invaders brought the witches further to the west, to the Kuban, to the Krim, to Belarus, to Poland, and eventually Germany itself.
Wow.
Sometimes they made up to a dozen sorties a night, with only a few minutes of breaks in between. There are many stories of those young women who came from many different backgrounds and who did share their own personal tales of heroism, tragedy, and idealism. We were young and fearless. The fear came later, one of the survivors would recall. Heroic achievements and accomplishments led to more heroes of the Soviet Union than any other Soviet bomber regiment, 23 by the end of the war, with usually at least 800 sorties made.
So I'm willing to guess in comparison, Hero of the Soviet Union would be on par with the Congressional Medal of Honor or the Victorian Cross. I mean, that's a pretty big deal. That's incredible. I have to tip my hat to those brave women who took on the Germans.
After the war, and after the regiment was disbanded, their commissar, Yevdokia Rachkevich, took it upon herself to personally search for the crash sites of every last one of her lost flyers to provide an accurate history of the regiment and the women that served and fought with it.
Undetected, unrespected, brings the glory, tell the story. Deviation, undetected, still perfected.
Okay, badass women in bomber planes. That
Yes.
was a really good description, right? So how did you guys decide to choose this?
Actually, you know, when we started doing research for Heroes, this was one of the first that came up for us. Yeah, that's been in our what do you call it? Secret Sabaton archive for a while.
All right.
And yeah, we just thought it was a perfect way to open the album as well.
Yeah.
We have a tradition of doing something surprising for the first song, and I think that massive opening was a perfect way to start off the album. You know.
Yeah, and then the tempo change into the
Oh
chorus.
yeah, sorry, you're right. Yeah, and we did something different there also with the chorus being half beat compared to the rest of the song, and which is something I really hate.
But if you hate it, why did you allow it to happen in this instance?
It's the only time I actually thought it worked.
Yeah?
You know, we wanted that.
Whose suggestion was it? Who said, "Hey, come on, let's do this"? And you said,
Oh, I did that to myself.
"Oh, okay."
But no, I remember so clearly when we were doing the PR for this album. It's a couple of years ago now, but I was doing an interview and I was in the final stages of doing something else. I was in the studio. Interviewer was a bit nervous, I
Okay.
should say, and not used to doing interviews. And we had like, I think, a regular 30-minute interview. I was on the phone. He asked me to tell something. Well, you have a lot of stories. Could you tell me something from the album, you know,
Okay.
story-wise? And I started, yeah, well, I can make an example out of the first song. And I started telling the story of the Night Witches.
Okay.
And I got a little bit carried away, you know,
Yeah,
because I was proud of the song and the story. So I, you know, got carried away. And I probably spoke for about 8 minutes about
Wow.
only that song and the story about it. When I was finished, it got silent. And then I hear, okay. And the next song?
Oh man.
What?
Oh gosh. Oh, that's brilliant. So,
That's
now,
a-
what was the reception for
Terrible interviewer. How dare they say and the next song? Come on.
Night Witches? You know, I mean, was this because this is not something that's familiar to people?
No. The story in itself is fantastic, no matter if it would have been men or women.
Yeah.
The fact that it is women, it's a, you know, extra nice bonus, I think.
Yeah.
And
It's very Soviet Union too.
yes, and it's still, you know, a part of our live set, very popular with the fans and us as well. I think we have some of the coolest, you know, pyro and video stuff going on that song as well.
Absolutely.
So I actually really enjoy playing that because I get off. We all I guess go off stage as the live intro for that song starts, and I sing the intro off stage, and I just get running in on the first boom of the verse.
But I have a very important question that I'm pretty certain everybody, not only everybody who watches Sabaton history, but everybody who's ever seen Sabaton or listened to Sabaton wants to know. Now, Night Witches, right? They you know, to avoid you know, any outward appearances of too much femininity and stuff because of problems with the male soldiers and stuff, they all cut their hair really short. They all crop their hair, right? One, do you think any of them had your hairstyle?
I certainly hope not.
And two, do we have any pictures of you when you were a kid with like the same? Did you have the same like?
I was born like this.
Okay.
All right, Joachim. Well, thank you very much for this today.
Thank you very much.
You know, I always love talking to you about these songs. All right. Well, we'll see you next time
Thank you all.
on Sabaton History.
All right, everyone, you know the drill. You click, 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 click. get some subscriptions, check out Indy's other channels, become a Patreon. That's it. Get the fuck out of here.
All right. Well, first of all, outstanding history of the Night Witches. Folks, if you want us to watch the animated video too, we will get to that. Please give us your feedback, because without your feedback, how we're going to know? But is this the kind of stuff that you guys and gals like? Type it in the comment section below. After all, this channel is called Americans Learn, and I really like how Sabaton history keeps its stories condensed, on point, and give us some interesting information behind some of these music videos that we have watched here. So, look, I did promise that we'll start in order, starting with number 1, but I felt like the Night Witches deserved some more respect. And since I'm in charge of the 1s and 2s, technically, kind of, sort of, I could do whatever I want. But nonetheless, a promise is a promise, and I will get to that right away. Again, folks, thank you so much for your support. Please, 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 please support the original content creators, because it's the right thing to do. So be a hip, cool cat and do that. Support Sabaton History, because they have a treasure trove of outstanding videos, and my homework assignment is to go through all of them. So, again, please take good care of yourselves, keep on winning, and keep an eye out in the sky, because the Night Witches are still flying about. Peace and take care.